Hey everyone, welcome back to Crime Family. I'm your co host AJ, and I'm here with my sisters and co hosts Stephanie and Katie, as always. And for this week's episode of the show, we are going to be talking about the mysterious disappearance of Bryce Laspisa. Now, this is one of the weirdest missing persons cases that I've learned about. And I've actually known about this case for quite a while. I wanted to do it on the show. You know, every season when we're like thinking of cases to do, this one always pops in my head. But for one reason or another, we just have never done it. We just never decided to do it. But this time I wanted to cover it on the show. And I know the two of you are both familiar with this case. And as of this recording, this is still an unsolved case because he went missing and there's still many, many questions. So I know I'm excited to kind of hear your guys' opinions or thoughts, because I feel like we talked about this case, like the name of it, but we've never actually discussed it between the three of us, like what our theories were or like what our thoughts are on the case. So interested to hear your guys' perspectives and your thoughts on it. So I'm going to just kind of dive right in. And so Bryce Laspisa was a 19-year-old college student with a bright future ahead of him. So he was born in April 30th of 1994, and he was the only child of Karen and Michael Laspisa. And they were a close-knit family, and they originally lived in Illinois, but they relocated across the country to Laguna Niguel, California, after Bryce graduated high school. So Bryce was artistic, charismatic, and he was known for his talent in graphic design. So this actually led him to enroll at Sierra College in Rocklin, California, where he was studying industrial and graphic design. And so Rocklin was a suburb of Sacramento, and the distance from his parents' home in Laguna Niguel to Bryce's college was about 450 miles. So they had relocated across the country, and Bryce didn't stay like in the same city as that his parents were in to go to college. He did relocate, but they were still in the same state as him because they, like I said, moved across the country. So he was just 450 miles away from home to go to Sierra College. So for most of his freshman year, Bryce seemed to be really thriving. So he made lots of friends. He was doing well in his classes, and he started dating a girl named Kim Sly. And so the summer after freshman year, he returned home and he lived with his parents for the summer, and he appeared to be in pretty good spirits. He even enrolled in an English class over the summer between freshman and sophomore year to get ahead in some of his coursework. So he was definitely still thinking about his future. He was, you know, preparing himself to do better, to get ahead, and he was still committed to his academic, future. So when he returned to Rocklin for his sophomore year, something was noticeably different. So his friends quickly began to notice a stark change in his behavior, and within just a few days of returning for the second year, his actions would lead to one of the most perplexing missing persons cases that I'm aware of. So that's kind of the setup for this whole case. So, like I mentioned, as Bryce settled back into life at Sierra College for the fall semester, his behavior became increasingly erratic. His roommate, Sean, quickly noticed that Bryce was drinking very heavily, so much so that he was consuming like an entire bottle of hard liquor almost every day, which was out of the usual for him. So when his parents later learned of this, like throughout the whole investigation and everything, they were pretty shocked. They had not seen any signs of excessive drinking when Bryce was home for the summer. So this makes his sudden shifting behavior all the more alarming. And obviously he probably would drink and stuff with his friends in his freshman year, kind of like every college student does. But, even if he drank a lot with his friends in the first year, his escalation of his drinking in the second year must have been so drastic that his friends really did start to take notice of how much he was drinking. And he was not even really drinking like in like a party atmosphere. It was just drinking all the time, every day. So in addition to alcohol, Bryce had began using Vyvanse, which is a prescription stimulant for ADHD. And this is a disorder that Bryce did not have. And Vyvanse is basically like a generic version of Adderall. So it's like an off-brand version, and it's known for keeping users awake and alert for long periods of time. So what remains unclear is when Bryce started to take the Vyvanse. So this was something that I couldn't really find in any of the research, and is kind of unknown, and probably no one really knows except Bryce himself. So, the question is, was it something that he experimented with during his freshman year? Did he begin taking it in the summer between freshman and sophomore year? Or did he just randomly start taking it when he returned to school for his sophomore year? His friends and parents never really noticed any signs of stimulant use before, but now it seemed as though he had gone from like 0 to 100 overnight, and he was taking the drug daily. And since he had no prescription for it, because like I said, he didn't have ADHD, which is what it would be used for, it's assumed that he was obtaining it illegally. So his friends were growing increasingly concerned, and they noticed that he was staying awake for extended periods of time and just acting strangely and out of the ordinary. So August 26th of 2013 was the first day of classes, and Bryce attended a few classes that day. He then called his mother the next day, assuring her that everything was going well. Now, some reports that I saw did say that his classes began on the 27th and that he called his mother the same day, but some, like I said that they started on the 26th and then he called his mother the next day on the 27th. But either way, he went to class the first day of classes and was excited about it and was talking to his mother about that. So his mother, Karen, thought nothing of it at the time. It was just kind of a routine check-in call. Nothing stood out to her that would be alarming in any way. However, reports suggest that around the same time that classes started, Bryce began giving away some of his belongings. So he gave away his Xbox, he gave away a pair of diamond earrings that his mother had gifted him, and he gave them to his roommate Sean without really any explanation, which is kind of a red flag. And then came a text message that caught Sean's attention. So he sent a message, quote, "I love you, bro. Seriously, you are the best person I've ever met. You saved my soul," end quote. And so while the text or the content of the text wasn't necessarily alarming in and of itself, but it was just an unusual message that Bryce had never sent to him before. And then kind of with kind of his change in behavior, his elevated drinking and all of that thing, with this message, Sean was alarmed. So he decided to actually call Bryce's mother to let her know that something was wrong. And Bryce's girlfriend, Kim, was also growing increasingly worried. So he had been sending her strange text messages as well. And then on August 27th, he suddenly told her, quote, "You'd be better off without me," end quote. And then when she asked if he was breaking up with her, he confirmed that he was. Then the next evening, August 28th, Bryce drove an hour and a half from Rocklin to Chico, California, where Kim lived. And when he arrived at Kim's apartment, he officially ended their relationship but refused to explain why. So just very weird and out of the blue. And this was alarming to Kim. So his demeanor was strange. He appeared to be making rash decisions and just was not like him. She had known him all of the previous year, and it just wasn't like him to do this. So concerned for his safety, she actually took his car keys and refused to let him drive home. She then called his mother, Karen, to tell her that something was very wrong. So within 24 hours, two of the people closest to Bryce, Sean and Kim, had contacted his mother out of concern for his well-being. So this is obviously something that should be very alarming, because they obviously went the whole first year with nothing like this. And then all of a sudden, within 24 hours, she's getting calls from two of his closest people to alert her about his behavior.
Yeah, and
I just have a question.
okay, you go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, was he hanging out with different people from the first year to the second year? Like, did his like friend group changed, or was it like the same? Like, I always wonder when I was watching or like listening to this case, like they never really mentioned any of his friends. So I'm wondering if like the friend dynamic changed, or do you know?
Yeah, I didn't see anything that came up that said he was hanging with a new crowd. I mean, he was still in communication with his friends from before. Like, obviously, he was sending Sean that message. So it never really came up. Like, his roommate didn't say he's been hanging out with this weird crowd. It was more so just like, and also he had only been back a couple of days. Like, he went back like maybe like a week or whatever before, and then, or a couple weeks before, and then this was only like the first or second day of class. So he'd only been back for 2 weeks. So probably not enough time to really establish. Well, I mean, other than the drinking and that he was staying awake and he was acting erratic, like that was noticeable, but I guess not long enough time.
But was
to
he
say,
drinking
started
by himself, or was he drinking with other people?
Well, that's the implication, is that he was drinking. Like I said, it wasn't a party atmosphere. Like his friend didn't say we were all at a party and he was drinking. It was more like he's drinking every day. He's drinking hard liquor, and some of the stuff I said that he had kind of graduated from like beer to hard liquor. So in the first year it would be like just beer, and now it was like hard liquor, like in excessive amounts, plus the stimulant use, using the Vyvanse, which is probably in
Because
that combination
I was
too.
just wondering, like, maybe someone or like a group of people were like influencing him to like be this different person. But if there's nobody else in his like, if his friend dynamic didn't change, then that doesn't really make sense.
Also, in, like, the Disappeared episode that's on Discovery Plus, like, they talked to his parents and stuff, and his mom even said that over the summer, like, Bryce wasn't drinking at all, and, like, maybe she just didn't know that he was, but I feel like if he was drinking that much, it would be obvious. Like, if he was drinking, like, a whole bottle of hard liquor a day, she would probably notice something was up. So whether he could have been drinking here and there, she just didn't know, but it obviously wasn't at the extent that it was for those, like, 2 weeks, so it just seems kinda weird that, like, as soon as he gets back to school, he just kind of, like, goes wild and just starts drinking and does drugs excessively, like, it just seems like a really weird shift super fast. I mean, you don't have a problem until you do, right? Like, you don't and then you do, so but, like, what triggered that is a huge mystery.
Yeah, yeah. So like something shifted, like in the blink of an eye, it sort of seems, from the minute he kind of returned back to classes, or back to school, or back to Rocklin. And yeah, and I've heard another podcast too, like even if he was like this, he would still be considered underage drinking. So even if he was drinking, it's not like it's something he would tell his parents, probably, or like show to his parents. So it is possible that he was drinking more than they knew. But still, if you're living under the same roof, you can't really drink that amount. Like his roommate noticed it when he went back to college, and they were living under the same roof. So you think his parents, for the 2 months before that, when they were living under the same roof, would also notice. But maybe you're more open to your roommate than you would be to your parents. So I don't
But, I
know.
mean, his, like,
But
mom did say that they were super close and they had, like, a really close bond, so I feel like they would still be, like, hanging out with him a lot and talking, and so even if he didn't say, "Oh, I'm drinking, I have a drinking problem," they would notice because 'cause they're with him all the time, and they would know if his behavior is changing, right? So, I feel like even if he didn't outright say it, they could tell because of he lived with them, like you said, but also because they just were close anyway, so, I don't know, it just seems like they would know if something was up. And they didn't seem to notice anything,
yeah,
so
yeah, because like when they're getting this information, obviously when Sean calls them and Kim calls them, like this is alarming information. So obviously they weren't clued into anything before. They weren't like, oh, this makes sense based on what we've seen. Like it was all news to them. So obviously there was no indication
also,
during the
I just wanna say,
summer.
like, how bad would it have to be for them to call Bryce's parents? Because I mean, like, I don't know about you, but I've never called a friend's parents to be like, "So and so's acting crazy," right? Like, I mean, and people have been in weird situations, and I that's never crossed my mind. So, I mean, good on these friends for, like, we gotta get the parents involved, but, like, how crazy must it have been for them to be like, "Yeah, let's call his parents." I personally never done that, so it just seems like it's like a
Yeah.
intense situation.
Yeah. And that's sort of a thing of last resort. Like you would never really do that unless you were severely concerned. And not even just the drinking. I think if it had been just the drinking, then maybe they would have been concerned, but maybe not enough, especially in that short amount of time. It was more so like the erratic behavior and like just deciding to break up with Kim on a whim, or like giving Sean his personal items like his Xbox and all this stuff. Like that was super weird to them. So it
Yeah,
was,
and, like
the drinking was like a part of the
yeah,
behavior,
and
but not
Vyvanse is
all of it.
like an amphetamine, so it, like, has, like, kind of the same effects as, like, methamphetamine, sort of. So, yeah, you can imagine what people on meth are like. So if he was acting like that, even just a little bit, like, yeah, that'd be alarming. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it was just a super concerning situation. And so, like I said, he went to Kim's place and confirmed that he was breaking up with her. She called his mother, and she actually refused to give him his keys back. Like she took them and she wouldn't let him drive home because she was that concerned about him. So Kim actually put Bryce on the phone with his mom, and he insisted to his mom that he was fine. Everything was fine. And he sort of made it seem that like Kim was just acting out because she was upset about their breakup or something. So probably kind of said, we got into a fight because I'm breaking up with her and she stole my keys and she won't give them back. And now she's calling you and she's making this whole scene. And so that was sort of, I guess, how he probably framed it to his mother. And so his mom actually offered to book a flight immediately to come see him, because it was about a 7-hour drive from Rocklin to where they were living. So, the flight's obviously the easiest way. So she offered to just book a flight immediately. She wanted to come see him, but Bryce assured her that it wasn't necessary. He said, quote, "Don't book anything until I talk to you. I have a lot to talk to you about," end quote. And his mother said that he didn't sound like super sad or didn't sound super heartbroken, but she had no idea what he was referring to in terms of that he has a lot to talk to her about. He didn't give any indications of what that could mean, just that he had a lot to say, and he didn't want her to make any reservations or book anything until he had the chance to talk to her. So they were on the phone for a little bit of time, and eventually, after speaking with his mother and, Kim went back on the phone with his mother, and after a while, Kim just eventually relented. She returned Bryce's keys to him, and at about 11:30 p.m. that night, Bryce left her apartment and began driving south towards his parents' house. And like I said, he lived about 7 hours away. He lived about 7 hours north of his parents, so he began driving south towards his parents' house, but his mother didn't know, based on the information that I've seen, she didn't know at that time that he was going to be going to their place. She probably thought he was just going to get his keys back and return to his apartment in Rocklin. But he didn't go back to his apartment and started to drive towards his parents' house. And the time that he was at Kim's apartment, that was the last time that anyone who knew Bryce actually saw him. So at about 1 a.m. on the 29th, so this would have been just about 90 minutes after he left Kim's place, Bryce did call his mother, but there are conflicting reports about whether she answered. Now, this was weird because when I listened to, it was actually Crime Junkie, I believe it was there, they said that he called his mother and spoke to her, but other places that I looked at said that there was an uncertainty, like she didn't answer. They didn't actually have a conversation at 1 a.m. He had called, but like maybe she was sleeping or something. So that was a little bit of conflicting information that I got from different sources. So I don't know if they actually did speak at 1 a.m. when he called her, but he did try to call her. Regardless, though, like I said, she probably believed that he was back in his apartment, going back to his apartment. But in reality, Bryce, at the time of this call, was just about an hour south of Rocklin, and he never returned home to his apartment. So his parents only discovered the next day that he wasn't actually at his apartment when they contacted his roommate, Sean, who confirmed that Bryce had not returned home the previous night. So, and what kind of set them in motion to like call Sean was because at 11 a.m. on the 29th, his parents, Karen and Michael, got an automated call that's stating that Bryce's car required roadside assistance. So this was concerning. So they actually were able to check his credit card activity because they had access to his accounts. I guess he was using their card, or they had given him a card because just, for expenses and stuff. So they had the ability to log on and actually see his credit card activity. And they saw that there was a charge from Castro Tire and Truck in Button Willow, California. So Button Willow is actually a very small town about 280 miles south of Rocklin. But Button Willow was kind of along the route to their home. So it was between Rocklin and where they lived in Laguna Niguel. So this kind of suggested to them that he was probably heading home. And his mother's probably thinking, he said he had something to talk to me about. He really wants to talk to me. So given that he's in Button Willow and it's like closer to their house than the college was, they're like, oh, he's probably driving home. That's a safe assumption. It's not like he's like in a random direction, like 4 hours west or something, and they have no idea where he's going. You can kind of see that it would be like in that direction, so it's a safe assumption that he's just driving home. So yeah, they saw that he had the credit card activity from Button Willow, that they called Sean. He said that, no, Bryce never came back to the apartment last night. And so they were concerned. So they actually called the automotive shop and they spoke with a technician there named Christian. And Christian did confirm that Bryce had called the shop for assistance at around 9 a.m. that morning because he says that he ran out of gas. So Christian actually went and delivered gas to him around 9:30 a.m. and said that when he saw Bryce seemed alert. He said nothing was like out of the ordinary, really, just that his eyes were slightly red. Um, now, now this call that his parents made to this automotive shop was around noon. So Christian said that he saw Bryce at around 9:30. So it's a couple of hours since that happened. And she had asked Christian, or maybe Christian offered to like go back to where he met Bryce and gave him the gas to see if he was still there, or maybe if he was in the surrounding area, or if he maybe needed help, or something else maybe was wrong with his car, not just the gas or something like that. So Christian does go back to this place and he sees that Bryce is still there and he's sitting in the exact same spot. His car is parked in the same spot and he's just, meaning that he had been there for at least 3 hours at this point. So that's kind of weird. So Christian says that he went up to Bryce's car. He handed him the phone and Bryce assured his mom that he was on his way home. Buttonwillow was just about 3 hours away from his parents' home. So they expected Bryce home by 3 p.m. So probably still weird, that he would be sitting in this parking lot or this area for like 3 hours without moving. But maybe they just thought he had went for a drive. He drove through the night and was tired. So he just pulled over to sleep or something. So he confirmed around noon that he was okay and that he was going to just drive the rest of the way home, which was about 3 hours at that point. So like I said, they expected him home by around 3 o'clock. But as soon as 3:30 came around, he hadn't arrived home and his parents had tried calling him, but he was not answering any of his calls. So his parents were very concerned at this time. They actually called the police and reported him missing shortly after. And it kind of ignited sort of this hunt for him by the police right away. And the police were actually able to track his phone through his phone company. I guess they got a hold, I think it was AT&T was his phone company. So they were able to get a hold of them pretty quickly and they were able to track his location. And they found that the phone was still pinging in Buttonwillow. And it was actually pinging just 8 miles down the road from where he had been at noon. Like when his parents called him and he was in that area with Christian, he was only 8 miles away from there hours later. So that was obviously super concerning as well. So he didn't really go very far. He definitely wasn't close to getting home. So yeah, super weird. So the police, they locate Bryce's vehicle and it's parked on the side of the road near Interstate 5 in Buttonwillow. And Bryce is still in the driver's seat. So the police say that Bryce was cooperative and he was polite to the officers when they approached his vehicle. They actually had to do a field sobriety test and he passed it. And they did a search of the car. There were no drugs or alcohol found in the car or on him at all. And so when asked why he was lingering, he simply said that he needed to blow off some steam. And so the officers told him to call his parents because obviously they were concerned since they called the police. But they said that Bryce was very reluctant to do this. He did not want to call his parents at all. So the police actually had to dial for him and they got his parents on the phone. And when Bryce spoke to them again, his mother urged him to just get something to eat, continue driving home. Like they just wanted to see him, make sure everything was fine. He was only a few hours from home. So they just told him, like, get home quickly, eat something and come back. So he agreed to that. And the police confirmed to his mother that Bryce did not seem to be under the influence. Like I said, he passed the field sobriety test. There wasn't drugs or alcohol on him. He was being cooperative for the most part, other than, I guess, his reluctance to call his mother. But he was, polite. He wasn't combative or anything. So they said he was still alert enough to drive the car. They didn't have any concerns in that area. So they let him, drive off. Or they let him, they said it was fine. So when the police left him, they were under the assumption that Bryce was just going to begin driving, get something to eat, like his mother said, and then drive the 3 hours to his parents' home. However, Bryce did not immediately move from that location. So hours later, and I guess the timeline on this is a little bit foggy because I've heard different things, but hours later, Christian checks on Bryce again. So whether he had contacted the parents again or whether they had contacted him again, but for whatever reason he goes and checks on Bryce again.
Yeah, I
and he
think it
finds
was
him
like
still parked
Christian. They had got Karen had got a missed call from Christian, so she called him back, and then Christian offered to go see if he was there again. But Karen was like, "Oh, there's no way he's still
Oh,
there,"
okay.
but Christian's like, "I'll just go check." So I think that's how that came up.
Oh, okay. So, like, Christian was probably just calling to, like, check in,
Yeah.
and that was the missed call?
Honestly, this guy's going above and beyond, like, he's a tow truck driver, and he's, like, going back and forth all day with his parents to make sure that he's, like, okay. Like, that's doesn't usually happen. Good guy.
Yeah, super nice. Yeah, super nice. He's the hero of this story. Um, so yeah, I guess, yeah, like I said, the when the different sources that I looked at did have sort of different information, so I wasn't really sure how he came into contact with his parents again, whether he had called or they had called. But anyway, he checks on Bryce again, finds him still parked alongside the road where the police left him hours earlier. And now this is like hours later, so he's been like in Button Willow, like on the side of the road, or where Christian originally saw him in the morning. This is like going on like 12 hours or something at this point. Like, it's a long time where, so concerning that he's, for whatever reason, stalling from going home. But it's so weird because all of the people along the way are not reporting any strangeness in behavior. So it's kind of weird that his friends were saying he was acting erratic. He was being super, super impulsive, and he was like, just clearly not himself. But then the police and then Christian are saying like nothing was out of the ordinary. He didn't seem to be like under the influence of anything. He was like talking normally. He was like not freaking out. So it's just
Yeah,
kind of
and he
weird
passed
that
that sobriety
difference.
test. Like, I feel like if you were actually drunk or, like, high on something, there's no way you can fake that, right? It's not like and if he was having, like, a psychotic break or something, like some sources suggest, like, how do you then talk to your parents and they think that you're being completely normal? Like, you can't just turn it on and off, right, if you're going through something. So I find that so weird that he was, like, with it enough for his to fool his parents at least, or not even, like, I don't know. It's hard to explain.
This part of the
Yeah.
case is sorry, this part of the case is where I'm so confused and conflicted of what was going on with him, to me, like, he's afraid to go home, he doesn't wanna go home, or he's afraid to go back to college, like, he's just, like, stuck in this, I don't know, time s like, not warp, but time stop where he just doesn't wanna go anywhere and just stopped, and I don't know, I was watching the documentary on Discovery Plus, and I was, like, so baffled by his actions of just staying in that car for 13 hours, not going anywhere. Like, what was he thinking about? What did he wanna do? Like, was he, like, contemplating something? Was, he scared of something? Like, it's just so confusing to me, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And I still don't
And the thing
understand
is, like,
after watching it.
nobody knows if he actually, like, got out of the car and went somewhere and came back, but for me, I picture, like, yeah, he's just sitting there this whole time, like, for, like, 12 hours, 13 hours, just, like, thinking and, like, wondering what to do. Like, it feels like he said, he has a lot to talk to his mom or his parents about, and yet he's still, like, hesitant to go home because then he'll have to actually talk to them about it. He doesn't want to, but he's on his way, so it's just, like, he's definitely going through something, like, he's conflicted about whether he's actually gonna talk to his parents or whether, he's just gonna, just avoid this thing altogether. So, obviously, he's
Was he,
going
like
through a
did they
dilemma, but
but to me, he's, was he, trying to get away from somebody? Like, did he get himself in a situation where maybe like a drug dealing situation where he just wanted to go somewhere and but nobody knows where he was? Like, because I feel like you don't sit in your car for 13 hours and just, not go anywhere or think or talk to anybody. I just found it so
yeah.
weird, so to me, it's like he's trying to run away from something or someone or, got himself in a situation where he doesn't know what to do. It's like, I don't know, it's very
Yeah,
bizarre.
that was kind of like my thought too, where it was like maybe he did get himself into like this drug dealing situation or like he was in debt to somebody and that's what he needed to tell his parents, but he didn't want to tell them, like they'd be, disappointed in him or he was like embarrassed about it. Even though he was close with his parents, like nobody wants to tell their parents that they're in debt to a drug dealer or something like that, right? So I don't know if it was just like he was so broken up about the fact that he was in trouble or something. I don't know. It's just like we said, nobody knows what he had to talk to his parents about, so
And
Yeah.
what
And like, oh, go ahead.
And whatever and something else that crossed my mind, I'm not sure if it crossed anybody else's mind, but I was like, maybe he was involved with this drug dealer, and they threatened to, like, hurt his family, so he was contemplating, like, "Do I go home and, like, try to hide out and they'll find me and, like, hurt my family, or, like, what do I do?" Like, that was another thing that went through my mind, like, why doesn't he wanna talk to his mom? Like, why didn't he wanna pick up the phone? And why doesn't he not wanna go home? Because, like you said, he was so close to his parents that, like, you think he'd wanna go home, talk to his mom, 'cause, like, there's a comfort zone there, but he was, like, so reluctant not to, so it's like somebody threatened his family
Yeah,
or,
but it
like,
also seems like that's such a big situation to, like, unfurl in, like, 2 weeks, right? Because you don't think anything was, like, going on during the summer, because why would he be taking courses and, like, to be ahead for when he went back if he was, like, so reluctant and something was going on, right? And he didn't have to go back, but he did. Makes me think that, like, in just 2 weeks, something huge happened, which just doesn't seem like that long of a time for him to be, like, involved in this drug dealer, for them enough to, like, threaten his family. I don't know. It just seems like a lot.
Unless he was like, that wasn't happening, but he was like paranoid that it was happening or something. Like if he was having some type of mental breakdown and was like seeing things or like imagining the situation that wasn't really happening. So maybe he was like in fear that it was happening, even though it wasn't.
That's true. He
Um,
could have also been, like, trying to come off of those drugs and stop drinking maybe, and, like, that like, when you cut stuff off like that just randomly, it can really mess with you. Like, he could be coming down off that stuff and, yeah, affecting his thoughts for sure.
but I also feel like the amount that he's drinking that heavily and taking Vyvanse so heavily, I feel like if you're coming down off of that, you would be in like this sort of um like withdrawal state. But no one ever says that. Like I said, Christian, the police, and the police I'm sure have dealt with a lot of people who were on drugs or withdrawing from drugs. So like you'd think they would have like said this is consistent with like behavior of someone who and there was no drugs found in the car, so he wasn't taking drugs while he was driving, wasn't drinking while he was driving. There were no like credit card activity of him buying alcohol along the way. Like you know what I'm saying? Like and then we're going on what, like almost like 24 hours of him not drinking at all and not taking Vyvanse when he was doing it every day all day before for the last 2 weeks. Like you'd think he would be in some kind of manic sort of state because
Well,
of that,
yeah, and how could he fake that
but that never
when
comes
he's
up.
talking to his parents? Like, you can't just pretend you're not going through that because you're talking to your parents, right? So and they didn't seem like they didn't feel like there was anything wrong, so, yeah, that's a good point because you can't just turn it off if you're feeling like that for, like and then go back to it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and his actions are also a little bit inconsistent because it's like he didn't have to drive home. Like I said earlier, his mom was under the impression that he was going back to his apartment. So it was him that just decided to like drive in the direction or to go home, which he didn't have to. No one asked him to. And so it's like he obviously wants to go
Well,
home.
yeah, and
But
his
then
mom
like
offered to come out there, so she coulda come out there, and he coulda talked to her at his campus or his apartment or whatever, right? Like, why did he have to drive home to talk to her? Like, that's yeah, like, another weird thing.
That
yeah.
like, that's what I was thinking, like, maybe he had a plan of maybe he wasn't gonna go home at all. Like, I mean, we'll get into, like, more details of the case, but, like, I'm just wondering, like, maybe he already had this thought in his mind that, like, I'm just not gonna go home, like, after selling all of his stuff, like, maybe he had no plan of going home at all. And he just kinda, like, lied and say, "Yes, I'm on my way home," but when really in reality, he knew he wasn't going
Yeah,
home.
he was, like, going through the actions to make them think he was going home, but he really never had the plan of going all the way.
Yeah, and also something like is that I was going to say was he didn't all along this route. So from the time he leaves Kim's place, other than that one call at 1 a.m. that was either missed by his mother or whatever, he's never calling his parents. It's like he doesn't want them to know where he is because it's like Christian is the one who finds him, gives him the phone. He doesn't want to call his parents when the police talk to him. So it's not like he's like, so to me, it almost seems like he just told his mother, oh, I don't do anything until I talk to you. I really need to talk to you as a way to like just diffuse the situation because he needed to say something. So she didn't come on the plane. And that was what he had to say. And then like, because, if he really wanted to talk to her that, like, he doesn't have to go home to do that. He could just have a long conversation on the phone with her. And he had multiple times where he could have talked to her on the phone, and he's like actively not wanting to do that. So it's kind of weird. It's almost like maybe he didn't want to go back to his apartment because Sean had called his mother and he was maybe pissed at Sean, didn't want to see him. He couldn't stay at Kim's place because she was all pissed at him, and he didn't want to go to his parents' place, so he didn't really know where to go, and he's just driving around. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
like what I was
and there's, like,
thinking.
no evidence that, like, he called anybody else or anyone was trying to get a hold of him, so it's not like he was being harassed by, like, a drug dealer or something because nobody called him, he didn't call anybody. So it's not like he was sitting there like, sometimes it makes me think, like, oh, maybe he was in Buttonwillow, like, waiting to meet somebody, but he never contacted anybody, so it's not like he was even doing that. So that's, like, another yeah, like, what?
Yeah.
What was going on?
Yeah, and, like, apparently Buttonwillow is, like, not a place you'd ever really have any reason to be. It's, like, just a very small place, like, you go there to, like, fill up your gas, and
Yeah,
that's
I
it.
think
Like,
there's,
you
like, a
don't really
truck
stay
stop,
around.
like, it's like a truck stop town sorta thing where there's, like, a big place where trucks stop. And, but that's about it. So and, that's, like, another, like, theory that comes up, like, oh, maybe he was actually planning on maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, but, like, just, like, leaving, getting a ride with one of these long haul truckers so he could just, like, take off somewhere. And Buttonwillow would be, like, a place to do that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's super yeah, super weird, and also I was gonna say too, because we mentioned, like, he didn't it's not like if he was in the trouble with all of these drug dealers and he owed them money, what I find weird is, like, he didn't sell his belongings that he gave them to Sean. Like, he gave his Xbox to Sean, he gave, like, the diamond earrings to Sean. Like, those are things he could have sold if he really needed money to pay off these drug dealers, and he didn't do that, he just gave it to Sean. So to me, that was weird.
Mhm, that's true.
So that was yeah, that was, like, the one thing I couldn't really think of an explanation for, other than like the obvious one. Because there's also a lot of things that we'll get into later. Like a lot of people think like that's a big red flag for someone who might be committing or considering suicide if like they give away their possessions to people who are close to them and stuff like that. So that is something that comes up in the case too. But like, so that's the only really thing I can think of because he could have sold those items for like a lot of money, right? So I don't think he necessarily owed money to people just because of that. So I don't know. It's just super weird. Um, but yeah,
But
so
yeah, yeah, it was like like he was
so
actually planning the whole time not to come back, right? Because you don't give that stuff away if you're just leaving for the weekend, right? And like the message he sent to his friend Sean was kind of like a seemed like a goodbye, right? Like so it's like he wasn't planning on coming back, and nobody. I don't think his parents realized that he really wasn't planning on going back there. So yeah,
yeah, that's true. Like he gave away his things, he said goodbye to Sean, he went to Kim's place maybe to say goodbye to her, break up with her, like kind of like tying off loose ends before he would eventually just leave. Um but that's still out of care. Even if that was his plan, like it's so wild that something in 2 weeks made him want to leave, right? Because like he was doing perfectly fine the first year and everything was normal.
yeah,
And then it's just like in this like
and
couple
also
weeks
like
or like
he
couple
didn't
days or whatever.
say anything like a goodbye to his parents either, like he did with everybody else. So if he was planning on just leaving, he'd have that like final goodbye to them as well, which he didn't have. So it's like maybe he was, planning to talk to them and see them again. Because why wouldn't he just say goodbye to them as well? So that's like another. It's just like makes it still more mysterious.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we can assume that he probably was like, I know I just said like maybe he wasn't planning to go anywhere because he didn't want to talk to anyone or see anyone, but like he drove in the direction of his parents' house. So like that's the logical conclusion that he was like, he could have driven in the complete opposite direction that, because if you look on the map, like I have it up in Google Maps, like Rocklin's like north and where his parents live is like south. He could have driven east, right? Like to another state, right? Like if he was just going to try to run away. So it's like the fact that he's going close to where his parents live, like makes it seem like he was at least at one point contemplating going home or something. Um, so it's just super, super weird. So, so yeah, like I said, Christian checks on Bryce again, finds him still parked alongside of the road where the police left him. And he called Bryce's parents to inform them that, Bryce was still there. And he said that he was going to follow Bryce for a short distance to just ensure that he got on the highway because he was in this on the side of the road for hours on end. So he just wanted to make sure he got on the highway. So he follows Bryce to a local store where Bryce buys like a can of soda. And then drove behind him for about 10 miles after Bryce got onto the interstate. So Christian says that he didn't really notice anything off about Bryce's driving. Like, he wasn't driving erratic. He wasn't doing anything. Like, obviously, because eventually Christian pulls off and like stops following him. So you'd think if he was really being erratic and driving like crazy, that he would have not left him, right? So everything seemed to be normal. I mean, other than the fact that he's been on trying to get home for 13 hours and hasn't. But eventually, Christian takes an exit off the interstate. He goes home, and he's just under the assumption that Bryce was finally on the road to his parents' house, because that was where the interstate was. The direction was going the few hours to his parents' house. So his parents expected him home just hours after Christian tells them that he's on the interstate, because like I said, he's just a couple hours from home. However, Bryce calls his parents around 1:50 a.m., and this is now August 30th, and he says that his GPS is giving the ETA that he's going to be home like around 3:25. So he's about an hour and a half away from his parents' house at this time, just based on that. So his parents, okay, fine. He'll be home like before 3:30 in the morning. We'll just wait till he gets home. Then at 2:09 a.m., so this is just 20 minutes after the first call, and he calls his parents again and says that he's going to be exiting the interstate because he's just too tired to keep driving and he needs to pull over and rest. So, I mean, he was too tired. What was he doing for 13 hours in the car? Like, was he sleeping for those 13 hours? He wouldn't be tired if he was sleeping for 13 hours already. So, anyway, his parents, well, that's what he said. He's going to pull over, he's going to sleep, and then he'll drive the rest of the way home. So, then at 2:15 a.m., so this is just minutes after that second call to his parents at 2:09, there's surveillance footage or some camera footage that captures Bryce's car driving up a hill near the Castaic Lake recreation area. And cameras are actually only like on one side of this hill, so they only capture vehicles going up the hill, but they don't show the cars going down the hill. But obviously he does go down the hill, because the same camera captures the same vehicle hours later. Now it's 4:29 a.m. going back up the hill. So he's driving aimlessly, really. Like at 2:15 he's going up this hill, then 2 hours 15 minutes later he's going back up the hill. So where was he in those 2 hours and 15 minutes? Weird. I don't really know. And then about an hour after his car was spotted on the camera footage for the last time, his crashed car is actually discovered or found on an access road in the area, and it's turned over on its side. It appears to have been driven off a 25-foot embankment. Bryce was not inside the vehicle, and the investigation revealed that, like, they obviously tested this vehicle and did, the investigation, and actually revealed that the accelerator was activated even while the car was driving off the embankment. So it's not like there was any attempt shown that there was an attempt to slow down. So it almost seems very purposeful. Like he purposely went to drive off this embankment in like a possible suicide attempt or something like that, because he accelerated even when he would have known he was going off the road down this 25-foot embankment. So the car goes down the embankment and lands on its side at the bottom. And the rear window of the car was broken from the inside. So this indicates that Bryce had actually escaped the vehicle from the rear window. Bryce's laptop and his phone were still inside the car. And outside of the car, there was his duffel bag, and it was actually open, and his wallet was inside the duffel bag. So police also noticed that there were like a few drops of blood inside the car, but it wasn't believed that Bryce was seriously injured in the accident. So he obviously might have been cut a little bit just from the impact, which is causing the drops of blood, but it's not like he's, incapacitated. He's still able to escape out the back window and seemingly walk away. So he obviously wasn't suffering any life-threatening injuries at the time. And they didn't find any like drag marks or anything like that he had been like crawling, that he couldn't stand up and walk. Like there's nothing to indicate that he would have been crawling around. So he obviously gets out the back window, stands up, walks away. And so there was an extensive search of the area, because obviously it's super weird to find this car crashed without the person inside it at all or any sign of him. So they actually conduct a large search via helicopter. So there's several helicopters looking at the area. There's a huge lake nearby. So they have multiple divers in the lake for a long period of time, like looking through every corner of the lake to see if maybe he had fallen in. And they even bring in scent dogs. And so there was actually one of the dogs. So they have a dog that is brought in, and the dog detects Bryce's scent from the vehicle down the road to a dam that's on Castaic Lake, and it's alongside the dam. He's following the scent, and he actually follows Bryce's scent all the way to a truck stop on Castaic Road. And this is where the scent ends, right there. So that's super weird. So they actually bring in a second dog as well, and the second dog detects the same exact scent. So starts at the car, and it goes, along the road down to the lake to where the dam is, along the dam, and then to this truck stop. And that's it. Not going like maybe into the truck stop, but nowhere else. Like it just ends, which is super, super weird. And there's never been another sighting of Bryce since then. They've never found any remains of Bryce at all, even though they had those extensive searchers, like with the helicopters and then with the divers in the lake. Like they never found anything, and they never found any of his belongings other than like the duffel bag. Like all of his belongings were in the car or near the car, and they never found any other articles of clothing or anything else from him. And that scent just stops at the truck stop. So this is happening in 2013. So it's been, nearly 12 years since his disappearance, with no confirmed sightings of him. No one's heard from him. There's been no body found or anything like that. And that's kind of where the case ends, because there's just no other evidence that's ever come out since then. So obviously super, super weird. And there obviously are, like we kind of speculated or we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, but there are some theories that are going around. It's definitely one of the most perplexing missing persons cases of the last decade that I can think of. And so several theories have emerged. So one is that he was having some type of psychotic or break or mental health crisis. So some obviously believe that Bryce was experiencing a psychotic break, possibly triggered by a combination of the excessive alcohol use, the Vyvanse abuse, and sleep deprivation. His erratic behavior in the days leading up to his disappearance suggests that he was not in a rational state of mind. He may have wandered away from the crash site in a disoriented state and succumbed to the elements. That's like one of the theories, which again, I said never been any body found, nothing to suggest that he did succumb to the elements. And yeah, so what do you guys think of that potential? We'll go theory by theory here. Like, what do you think of that theory that he just was in some type of mental health crisis, which seems kind of clear based on his actions, and that he just kind of wandered off, disoriented, and just died?
That's what I want to believe. Oh, go ahead.
um I think like half of that is true. Like he's definitely going through something, but I don't think he wandered off and died, because where is his body? They did extensive searches, and they even like years or a year later, his parents still have searched the lake and stuff. They like dragged the bottom. They haven't found anything, and so if he was there, you'd think they would find something. They did find like a burnt body up there, like 5 days after he went missing, but it wasn't his, obviously. But you know, if he was up there, they would have found him because they found this guy. And so, yeah, I think half of it's true. Was going through some sort of break, but he didn't just die out there. That's my feeling.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like half of that, like I'm probably like 90% sure like he obviously was going through something mentally and he just wanted to get away and disappear, but I don't think he died because like Katie said, like they found another body that wasn't his there and they did all these searches and they just didn't find the body. So I don't think he died. I think he had a mental breakdown and is somewhere else.
Yeah. I
And I
kind of
also
agree with you. Like,
sorry.
mhm.
I also was gonna say like I don't think I don't even think he committed suicide because if he committed suicide when he threw his after he threw his body off the cliff, like his body would be there by the car or in the car or whatever. So it's like not like he like I don't even think suicide like I don't think he was trying to attempt suicide because he got out of the car and then walked somewhere. So Like, I don't even think that's even a obviously not a
Yeah,
possibility.
I think you
Well,
might
I mean, it's kind of.
I
Oh, go
think
ahead.
this might be like another theory that's coming, but I feel like he was having issues up until that point. He may have tried to commit suicide. That didn't work, but then because of the crash, he got disoriented, could have had a concussion, and didn't know who he was or where he was. And then from there, he like because his scent stops at that bus or at that truck stop, so he like actually does get a ride with a trucker, doesn't know who he is, and then just kind of rides off into the sunset. But I mean, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm leaning.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I was gonna say, I think I have like this first theory. Like, it's obviously something's not right with him. Obviously, he's having some type of mental, you know, breakdown or some type of, psychosis of some sort that he can seem like we talked about earlier to turn on and off. Like when he's talking to the police, he can seem normal. When he's talking to Christian, he can seem normal. When he's talking to his parents, he can seem normal. But it's only in these moments when he's not with anyone that he's having, I don't know. So weird. But obviously something was going on, whether it was like mental health or if it was just like emotionally. Maybe he was just emotionally overwhelmed or something and something was happening. But I don't think he like succumb to the elements like you said because they found that other body. They did such an extensive search, they're going to find something. Like they didn't even find a shoe of his or like a piece of clothing or anything other than what was at the immediate crash site. So super weird. And so the second one, the second theory is like intentional disappearance. So there are theories out there that say Bryce may have wanted to disappear. His decision to give away personal belongings and break up with his girlfriend suggests he was preparing for something, kind of like we suggested earlier. But if he did leave willingly, then obviously the question remains, where did he go? And there's never been a sighting of him since. No one's ever reported that they've seen him or whatever. So if he did intentionally disappear and start a new life, he did a very good job at keeping himself hidden.
Yeah, and like you said before, if that was his plan, like why is he heading in the direction of his home and why is he acting so weird? Like why not just go the opposite direction and just keep driving? Like why sit like 2 hours away from your house for 13 hours? Like that's like if that was his plan all along, like why do that? Like I feel like yeah, he was like definitely just contemplating between leaving and like going home that he just couldn't figure it out or I don't know. Like that theory by itself doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah. Cause I was also thinking like, yeah, because if he could have gotten a lot farther in 13 hours, if he just driven for 13 hours. But he did run out of gas. But I mean, one thing I was going to say, if that say if we this theory is right, which is probably not because he was in the right direction. Like if his parents had gotten a call that he needed gas, and then they did his credit card searches and found that it was like some other area, like in the opposite way direction, then it would have been more concerning to them because they're like, where is he going? Like if he's like 7 hours away, like in a different state or something. That's weird. So he kind of like, if this was true and he just happened to be like just in that general area, it's like they would have been like, he kind of got lucky in a sense that he was in the general direction of his parents' place because they could have just assumed he was coming home, right? Rather than being super alarmed that he's like way off in another state or something. But I don't think that theory is true because, like you said, he could have driven, like I said, he could have driven in the opposite direction, could have kept going north or east, whatever, right? So super weird. Um, yeah, I don't know. And then the third theory is that foul play was involved. Like some suspect that Bryce may have encountered someone after the crash who harmed him. However, there is no direct evidence to support that theory either. So maybe someone picked him up at that truck stop and like killed him after the fact and then did something with his body. We'll never find it. But that would be just a theory because it's an option, but there's never been any suggestion or evidence to suggest that. So I don't know. I don't really like it's hard to, I can't say I don't think that because we don't have anything to say either way, one way or the other.
Yeah, I feel like the odds of that are, like, so small because like, what are the odds that he's going through this, he tries to commit suicide or maybe not, and he drives off the cliff, he survives all that, he gets out, he gets into a trucker's truck, and then they kill him. It's just like, like, what are the odds of all these things? And then, I don't know, that just seems like not likely, but obviously it's could happen. But also the theory that I talked about, like, he could have been disoriented after all this, the crash. He doesn't remember who he is. He doesn't know where he's going. He does get into, like, a trucker's truck, but you'd think there'd be, like, some like a hospital report. Like he gets to the hospital because people are like, this guy doesn't know what's going on. We should report it. That never happened. Um, you they think like eventually down the line someone would be like, there's something going on here and report it, right? Like if someone doesn't know who they are, they have nothing on them, they're wandering around, you'd think that'd be like a weird sign. Or maybe like, and maybe he like actually still doesn't remember his parents, and then he knows he's missing, like he's this missing person, but he has no connection with them anymore because he doesn't remember that life. So he's like, well, I'm not gonna go back there because I really don't know them, kind of thing. Like he doesn't have that emotional connection anymore. So why go back after all these years? You know what I mean? That's a possibility, but the fact that no one ever reported it is just strange to me.
Yeah. Yeah, super super weird, and I don't think those like you said, I don't think that the sequence of events that would have to have that happen would have to be super unlucky for him. Like, it happens at the time that he's having this breakdown, tries to commit suicide, and then is killed later by someone else, just totally randomly. Um, so just super weird. And then the fourth theory here is kind of tied into the first one. It's like accidental death. Like, given the terrain around Castaic Lake, it's possible that Bryce wandered into the wilderness and succumbed to the dehydration, exposure, or by accident. However, despite extensive searches, like I said, no remains have ever been found. So really, there is only like foul play, intentional disappearance, or like accidental, like succumbing to the elements. And there's nothing to suggest clearly one way or the other.
I feel like they would have found him if he did die out there because I mean, they did a search so extensively, you can only get so far on foot in that time, and they would have like if they covered that area, he would have been there, right? So it's not like he died out
And they
in the
found that other
wilderness.
body, right?
Yeah, well, I mean that I think they found that so because it was obvious because it was like a fire, the body was on fire, that's why they found it. But they, they were looking around still. I don't know. It's just like
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear that he did get into a car because why would his sense just stop at the gas or at the truck stop or whatever? Like that to me is weird. The only way, like heard in other cases, like as soon as like dogs follow your trail and it stops immediately, they assume you got into a vehicle. That's the only way that it's going to stop suddenly. So maybe he did. And like, because of the fact that, like I said, the police believe that he maybe was cut because he was obviously there was drops of blood, but he wasn't like physically super like hurt. So he could have um like hailed it, not a taxi, but like got into the trucker's vehicle. The trucker wouldn't know anything necessarily happened unless he has like a small cut on his head, but he could explain that away. So maybe they didn't see the need for him to go to the hospital or anything. And then the trucker just drove him somewhere else. Maybe he asked, take me to this place. The trucker drove him there and then he got out after they're at this other destination and then succumbed to the elements in another area that they don't know to look for because they don't know he's there, or killed himself somewhere else in the elements, and maybe they found a body in another state, but they don't know. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like,
they just
because
didn't
we
link
see all the
it.
time,
Yeah.
like they don't, yeah, like they don't communicate with each other really, right? Like,
Yeah.
so there could be like a body found in another state that they just
But apparently,
haven't.
like, his DNA and, like, fingerprints are all in, like, the missing persons database, so if they ran it through that, they would know, but maybe that's only statewide, like, is it, the whole country?
But maybe it was like, well, but maybe it was like they found the body because isn't it like if they find your remains? I guess they can do DNA. Yeah, like from your skeletal remains, right? From your
Yeah, they
bones and stuff.
could, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's rare that
Yeah,
they
that's
can't do
weird. So I guess
DNA.
yeah, because like I have heard cases where it's like they couldn't get a DNA profile because the body was so, like, I don't know. That has happened before, right? Or it's like a partial DNA and
Yeah,
they
I don't
can't
know if that
tie it to
happens, like,
anyone. But
recent I think, like, older cases just because they didn't have the technology, but now I feel like because you can even tell if a body was in the soil and moved, like, even you can test the soil and find out that they were there, so I feel like it's really rare that you can't get DNA from somebody, from a body.
yeah, so he can't. So he can't be dead then, really, at all. Because if there was any body found anywhere, or he
They
could
just
be dead,
haven't
they just
found
haven't
it,
found him.
yeah.
But yeah, because if, like you said, if they did find the body, they would have ran it through the DNA and he would have been identified. There's never been, but I'm also like, he can't be dead, or So I'm kind of leaning towards like he died, they just haven't found his body, rather than like he is still alive and out there. Because it's like, to me, the fact that, I mean, this case isn't like super high profile, really. Like the average person probably doesn't know the name, but for no one to come forward and say they know him, like if he started a new life somewhere or whatever. In this day and age with social media where everyone's everywhere, like it's really hard. I feel like you have to work 4 times as hard as you would have 20 years ago to like stay hidden, right? And so he never has a bank account. He never has like a job where he's getting money on the books. Maybe he's getting cash. You know what I mean? Like there's no trace of him ever anywhere. He left his wallet
But I
behind.
mean,
He left his
he could have
phone
had a new
behind.
name, new identity, and so, his name is not gonna be flagged because this has a different name, so he could have a job
He could
somewhere.
also change his hair. Like he could have dyed his hair. Like he could have
Yeah.
done all kinds of things. The fact to me, like he didn't have his wallet and all that belongings were there, tells me that like he just wanted to start over
That's what I was gonna but
for
why
some
not
weird
take your
reason.
duffel bag full of clothes? Like, that's a weird thing, right? Like, okay,
Yeah,
leave your
that's.
ID, you can leave your computer, but, like, why not take a change of clothes and stuff? Like, that's the like, a weird part of it.
And if you had money, why not take that? Because you're not gonna get
Yeah, was
Bayfair
his
if you
wallet
can't
empty? Did he
buy
have
anything to
cash?
eat.
Like, that was one thing I was wondering too, like, he could have taken the cash and a
Yeah, it didn't
bag of
say
clothes,
anything
like, I
that I
don't
can
know.
find. Yeah, cash to just get you somewhere for the next, get you through the next couple days. Maybe he didn't have. He was a student. Probably didn't have cash. Who were getting broke, broke ass student? I don't think he had much cash at all. Um, but like, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I guess you, yeah. Why not take your duffel bag at the very least?
And
Like
if the
that's not
truck.
something that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but and if the truck drivers that like one of them picked him up, like if they see his posters around or like anything, they would have like. Do you think they would come forward and say like, "Oh yes, like I picked him up and like whatever," but like nobody has
But
ever
we see all
said.
the time. But we see all the time, like where people come forward like years later. Like even like the Asia degree one that we talked about. That guy went and said the person admitted to him like 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Like
but if
people don't want to get involved, or maybe they for because also that's an insignificant part of this trucker's life. Probably like, oh, he picked up a hitchhiker was one time like
Well, yeah,
10
and
years ago.
also,
Like I
like, he
don't
could be
know.
implicated. Like, yeah, I picked him up and dropped him off somewhere, but he's never seen again. It was like, well, you obviously did something, even if they didn't, right? So just like stay out of it would be like their mentality, probably.
Yeah,
It's gonna get
yeah,
pinned
yeah.
on
That's true.
you.
Because like you didn't do
Yeah.
anything. And you're like, you have no idea where he is. Like, you can't provide any helpful information necessarily, right? Like, oh, I picked him up and dropped him off 10 years ago. I have no idea where he is now. The only thing you're going to do is bring suspicion on
Yeah,
yourself.
exactly. Yeah.
So, why do that? Although, why would you even mention, like, if we're getting down the rabbit hole, but it's like, why would you even mention it? Like, if you were guilty, why would you mention it 10 years later to put yourself into it and then be pissed that you're implicated? It's like, well, if you said nothing, you wouldn't be. So,
Yeah, exactly.
you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Just super, super weird. And also, like, there was a lot of people. I went on the down the Reddit rabbit hole, and are a lot of people that are like actually like super pissed at like the parents because they actually think that the parents could have in that 13-hour period maybe done something like, but I don't want like to think that or say that because like
But yeah, like hindsight's 20/20, right?
obviously they didn't want this to
Yeah.
happen. Yeah,
Like there yeah, some people say like his
and they don't
mother
know he's in
they
the
could have
same
driven
place.
up there to meet him somewhere. Yeah, but they think he's on the road moving. How are they supposed to meet up with him? The whole time they think he's on the road, like, on the go, right? So it's like you're gonna drive up there and look around the highway, like, for someone that's driving. Like, that doesn't make sense. So, yeah, because they don't think he's sitting there this whole time. They don't know that he is. So,
But I guess maybe they're thinking like they could have just said, "Stay there, we'll come." But maybe that would have made him
well,
move
yeah, because his mom
if he
did
knows
offer to
they're
come up
coming.
there, and he said no the first time. So, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, you obviously you
yeah.
don't think this is the situation when it's happening, right? So, there's no way they could have known any of this, so
Yeah, because also, like, what's the point? Like, you leave to go find him, but he's actually getting to you, and then he gets to you when you're not there because you went to go find
yeah.
him.
Yeah, because
You know what I'm
they are
saying?
talking to him this whole time, right? And, like, one part that I don't think you mentioned was, like, his parents or his mom was like, "What are some of, like, the, um, landmarks that you're passing?" Or, like, "What are some of the signs? What do they say?" And he was just saying, "Oh, I don't see anything. I can't see any signs, but my GPS says I'll be there at 3:30." And so it was he's, like, just lying that he, was on the road. He just didn't wanna say where he was because he actually wasn't where he should be. So yeah, it's not like they were like, okay, see ya, and then like 13 hours later they didn't even do anything. They were like constantly in contact with him the whole time. So I don't know. I don't really think that they could have really done anything different other than get the cops to like hold on to him till they get there. Like that obviously like is extreme if you don't think there's really a huge problem. So yeah.
But I think given like yeah, I don't know. I mean, like given like the fact that two of his closest people to him, like Kim and Sean, were like deeply concerned about him enough to call her, means that something is going on. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. But like I said, every person who came into contact with him except Sean and Kim, like along this route, like Christian, and then the cops said that he looked fine. He was acting fine. He wasn't belligerent or manic or anything like that. Like he
These are
was
also people that don't know him
able
though.
to have a
So
conversation. Mm.
what is like
But they would have like
if he
noted
was
if he was
super weird,
acting
yeah,
manically.
but they wouldn't know if something's out of the ordinary for him because they don't know what he actually like. But obviously, some things are just out of the ordinary for any normal person, which he wasn't doing. So I don't know.
Yeah. Like the only thing Christian said was that his eyes were a little bit red, like when he saw him. So it's like, what was he sleeping? Was he crying? Was
Like, yeah,
he?
they could have been red because he was awake a whole
Yeah, he's like
for 13
sleep
hours.
Oh
deprived and
yeah,
Not
like
13
yeah,
hours, but
coming
like,
down off drugs apparently, and like hadn't eaten. So I mean, I don't know.
super weird. Yeah. So still like an unsolved missing persons case, and um, we don't really know anything other than that he like left his stuff behind. And like I'm assuming they would have done like searches like you kind of mentioned before of like his phone, because like they have his phones and there was never any searches of like you think somebody, and his laptop, they have his laptop too, they could have done a search of like what were the searches he was looking for, like how to disappear or how to kill
Yeah,
yourself
I
or
feel
how
like they
to
would have done
whatever,
that, right?
like
So if there was something weird that would have come out, wouldn't it have? And that like yeah,
yeah.
so
I mean, that would be my first thing. Check the laptop or the
yeah,
cell
check
phone.
his phone logs,
And I'm assuming,
which I'm
Yeah.
assuming they
and
did.
that's like that would be like a dream, and like in many investigations they would the dream to have a cell phone and a laptop that you can analyze and look at, um unless they were like damaged in the crash or something, but there's no mention of that, so I'm assuming they would have taken those in, and like nothing's ever been said about what was on it, so that probably means there's was nothing concerning on it. But also like you said earlier, Katie, he also wasn't talking to like this random drug dealer, right? Like he didn't have contact from an unknown number or like text messages to this random person or
Yeah,
like
or like
anything.
any like another friend being like, "Come pick me up in Button Willow. I'm gonna wait for you." Like that never happened, right? Like he wasn't waiting for somebody, or wasn't in contact with somebody, like telling them where to meet him or anything. So that's it's weird.
Yeah. So it's almost like he didn't tell anyone, didn't want anyone to know where he was, and was trying to just get away or. Because like the only thing I think it was like he kind of wanted to go for a drive. He needed like a day to just like not see anyone. He didn't want to see his friends, or he didn't want to see his girlfriend. He didn't want to see his parents. And he said that he told the police officer, I need to blow off some steam. So maybe that was his plan. Like, I'm just going to sit here until I like figure it out, whatever. And like, because I said he's not actively calling his parents at any time. The only time he talks to them is when like he's forced to basically talk to them, like when Christian's there and gives him the phone, and then when the police give him the phone or make him dial. Like, he clearly doesn't want them to know where he is or worry about him or whatever. So maybe he was just hoping he could just take time for himself, and then. But why does it have to be in Button Willow? It's random. I don't know. I guess that was just happened to be where it was. He just pulled over on the side of the road, but
That just happened where he ran out of
he was
gas,
just
right?
conflicted.
Like he ran out of gas there, so that's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
where had to stop.
yeah.
I think the
But he
reason
was, like I said. Oh, go ahead.
I think the reason why he chose to go there is because it was like he's kind of not really lying. He actually is on his way to his parents' house, but in reality, I feel like if he didn't run out of gas, he might have veered off to like the south or the south or the east or the west or wherever he would like. But because he was stuck in Buttonwillow, I think it was an excuse to say like, "Oh yes, I'm on my way. I just had to get out of gas."
But I also feel like he was going back and forth with like, yes, I am going to go home. And then he decided, no, I don't want to. I'm going to sit here and think about it. And he's like, okay, yes, maybe I will. And then he stops again, like, oh, actually, no, I don't want to. So I think he was like definitely going back and forth. Like his original plan was to go home. That's why he went that way. But then just along the way, he just couldn't make up his mind to actually go all the way. So, but yeah, like we said, obviously something's going on.
Yeah, and like that's what I was gonna say. Like he's obviously conflicted about like he's just conflicted. He doesn't know where he wants to go, what he wants to do. So maybe he like when he left Kim's apartment, he's like, okay, I'm gonna go home. So then he started to drive home, and then the more he thought about it, he's like, well, I'm not in a state where I can like talk to my parents right now. So like I'm gonna go somewhere else because like I said, he's 7 hours from his home. So if he like left and drove straight home, it would take him 7 hours. But Buttonwillow is 3 hours from his home, so that's 4 hours from where he left from. So he would have only taken him 4 hours to get from Rocklin to Kim's or I guess she was in Chino, so maybe he was a little bit further, but whatever. 4 hours or 5 hours. But this is like 9:30 a.m. or 9 is when he calls that gas station, right? And he left at 11:30. So that's 10, 11 out, whatever, 11 hours where he was just driving around. So he obviously has gone on a loop-de-loop, or like he didn't drive straight from there to there, right? Like he ended up there, but it took him like 3 times as long to get there. So was he just stopped along the side of the road along the way? Was he driving like the long roundabout route? Who knows? I don't know. Super weird. Super weird. And yeah, it's still unsolved. So if you do know anything about Bryce Laspisa's disappearance, we encourage you to contact your local law enforcement office or the FBI. Contact police, and because this is still an open case and an open missing persons investigation, it's obviously gone cold. We have no idea where he is, what happened, but we really hope that some answers can come. And we never know. Like we talked about last week with Asia Degree, like that was 25 years later, and now it's all kind of coming out, and like they're really close to potentially finding out. So it's like hope is never lost. I know, kind of like 10 years later, what are the chances? But it definitely can happen. And so we hope it does for everyone's sake. Could you imagine? That'd be wild if like he ends up just being found somewhere, like alive, like he took on a new name or something and he's somewhere else. Like that's super weird. That would be crazy.
Yeah, it recently came out that there was like, I think it was a case that Crime Junkie had done, like someone that disappeared, everyone assumed had been killed, but she actually came forward, was like, I'm alive, I just don't want to be bothered, kind of thing. So it was like, oh shit. So that actually does happen. I always think like, how often does that happen where the person just goes away and doesn't ever want to be like found again? I feel like that's rare, but I guess it does happen.
Yeah. Super, super strange. So that does it for our discussion about Bryce Laspisa case. Let us know your theories. So you can like write us an email, crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what your thoughts are about this case. If you have any theories or thoughts, and also maybe I'll put this PSA out there. So like we've gotten emails in the past about like people who like it kind of seems like they're providing tips to us. Don't come to us with tips. If you have a tip, go to the police, because that's what they're there for. We are not part of law enforcement, nor are we lawyers or anything like that. And like while we appreciate that you listened and you might know some valuable information, just don't come to us for tips, unless you report it to the police first, and then you can tell us that you did that. But yeah. So thank you so much for listening. You can follow us on all the social medias, Crime Family Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook, and Crime Family Pod 1 on X. And you can follow us on TikTok at Crime Family Pod as well. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Leave us a review and comments and everything like that on all the videos, all the stuff. You can watch us on YouTube too, Crime Family Podcast. So thank you so much, and we'll be back next week with a brand new case. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.